It's been 1 year since the fall of Mosul in Iraq and 9 months since President Obama vowed the U.S. would degrade and ultimately defeat ISIS. Today, ISIS controls more territory in Iraq and Syria than it did before, and by all accounts, the U.S. strategy is in disarray. This week, the White House announced that the president would approve sending up to 450 additional U.S. troops to Iraq in an effort to strengthen local forces fighting against the Islamic State. Tom Rogan, columnist with the National Review, joins me now by Skype. Tom, somehow these 450 additional U.S. troops whose hands are tied in terms of what they can actually do in the region are supposed to change the current trajectory?
Yeah, good to be with you, Marissa. I think it does reflect the president's creeping strategy in terms of being very focused on the domestic political angle, in terms of being aware that there is a lot more controversy surrounding his failed strategy, and that he wants to sort of throw a bone to that audience by giving a few more troops. But at the same time, he's very reluctant to do anything of the degree that would be necessary to actually have a serious strategic impact on the ground.
So is he just trying to appease his critics? Is that what you're saying?
I think he is. I mean, 450 troops may sound like a lot, but when you're dealing with the necessary training of hundreds of thousands of troops, when you're dealing with the Islamic State controlling a vast area along arterial highways, when you're dealing with the potential collapse of the Iraqi government, 450 troops, it isn't enough, because within that number, you are going to have people doing different roles. You're going to have a lot of American assets protecting those Americans, so they, for example, don't get kidnapped by the Islamic State. So it clearly, on its face, is unserious.
A lot of people have said this is a new strategy for the president. I would argue, what strategy? Because this doesn't really seem to be a good strategy, if any at all, for that matter. Now, you've written a piece recently where you talked about what the president's strategy should be. Can you elaborate a bit on that for us?
Yeah, well, so I had two main points. Number one, the president, I think, has to understand, has to accept, and I'm sure his briefers are telling him this from the State Department, the CIA, the military, that where America is absent from Iraq and absent from Syria, what you are seeing is what I call the politicization of sectarianism, which is to say that Iraqis are forced into a binary choice. On the one hand, Sunnis and the Anbari tribes, Western Iraq, who subscribe to a different, more moderate form of Islam than the Islamic State, in the absence of American support to help them fight off the Islamic State, which has essentially stolen their territory and taken over their governance structures, they are choosing, through the force of the gun or the coffin, to essentially yield to ISIS. And at the same time, other Iraqis who don't feel that they have any choice facing the threat posed by the Islamic State are choosing Iran. And Iran, that means at the short term, yes, Iran might provide some protection, but in the longer term, it's like a deal with the mafia. The Iranians will say, okay, we've helped you here, we've proven we're the only ones you can rely upon, and now it's quid pro quo, i.e. you better do what we want. So it's very destructive, and you see it spreading across the region.
If the president, I've seen some military experts argue that if the president was to take this seriously, put troops on the ground, as a number of officials have called for, yourself included, an expert, if he was to take this seriously, they could wipe out ISIS in just a few days.
Well, look, I think there would be a number of things. Number one, it would take a number of weeks to push ISIL out of the urban environments. That would be very tough, bloody fighting. I mean, the United States military could do it, but preferably we would get the Iraqis to do it. But certainly in terms of a concerted special forces effort on the ground, seriously arming the tribes, mobilizing them, securing them, and then pushing on with them, joining with massive air power, again, with people on the ground, American special forces, Canadian as well, you have great special forces, directing airstrikes. You could push ISIL out of the desert. You know what? In the desert, it's not easy to hide. And if you have enough assets on the ground, you can deny them movability across the battle space. You can push them into pockets, and then you can burn those pockets into the ground, essentially destroying them or forcing them to yield.
To what extent does Iran developing a nuclear bomb, which could ultimately spark a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, we could potentially see Saudi Arabia next with the nuke in the event that Iran gets it, to what extent does this aggravate the situation in the region?
Well, I mean, it's a big issue because the Iranians are concerned about a theological project in terms of expanding their power. You see that every day in Beirut, where they threaten politicians and they blow cars up if people disagree with them. They fund groups like the Lebanese Hezbollah. But at the same time, look, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, the Sunni Arab monarchies will pursue their own. The Saudis will get it from Pakistan. You would also potentially see al-Sisi in Egypt pursuing his own program as a kind of Sunni. He's trying to do the revivalist pan-Arab Sunni leader in Egypt. You would see the Turks potentially do it. And so you have all these unstable regimes that are defined by paranoia, by failings of political culture, by an absolute lack of trust and an absolute embedded sense of hatred, all with the potential of nuclear weapons. And if we think it's bad now, I mean, literally just think about it being enriched, literally. I mean, radioactive nuclear chaos. And that's the problem here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Tom, last question. What do you foresee happening in the next little while?
Well, I think, you're going to see in the short term the continuing advance of the Islamic State. I think at some point President Obama is going to put special forces on the ground, because even he is going to have to take his head out of the sand and look up and see reality. It becomes so overwhelming.
It's been a year. He hasn't done it yet.
No, I mean that's staggering. But look, I mean, at some point it is going to have to change. It depends how bad it gets. It depends how close the Islamic State gets to Baghdad, and that it's not going to be good in the short term. And we do need a far more comprehensive strategy at the secondary point of a military capability on the ground that really begins to address this issue, because at the moment this spread of chaos, the Islamic State is not just in Iraq and Syria now. It's in Nigeria, the Philippines, Indonesia, Tunisia, Libya, Pakistan, Afghanistan. I mean, you can go on and on and on. And that is the ultimate sign that the ideology, global Salafism, jihadist Salafism, is spreading, and that it is unconstrained.
Not to mention their message is spreading to the West. Okay, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.